gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Welcome to the second hour of the Big Money Show. I'm Jackie DeAngelis, joined by my co-host Taylor Riggs, Cheryl Casoni in for Dagan McDowell, Brian Brenberg, and our guest host joining us this hour, Kaltbaum Capital Management President Gary Kaltbaum. We are potentially moments away from a press conference between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. But minutes ago, things got very testy, as you can see, in the Oval Office. Edward Lawrence was in that room. And Edward, fiery was the word that you used. We watched it ourselves. Wow.
Wow is right, yeah. And that was between President Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President J.D. Vance in the Oval Office. Now, we were here to talk about the signing and ratification of a joint venture, economic deal between the U.S. and Ukraine. That's probably now the least of what they're talking about inside. That meeting is continuing in the Oval Office with the presidents. Who knows what they're talking about at this point? You know, in about an hour, we were supposed to see a news conference between the two presidents. At that news conference, Zelensky was supposed to sign that joint economic agreement. Now, it's already been ratified by the Ukrainian cabinet, which means that it is actually a deal going forward. It doesn't need Zelensky's signature on it. That's just a ceremonial signature that's going to happen. But we'll have to see how this all plays out. Now, we got a hint of how the peace negotiations would play out a little in the Oval Office. Here, listen to this. Here's President Trump talking to President Zelensky just minutes ago. Listen.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again, just say thank you.
I said a lot of times to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
Now, President Trump also saying that he can negotiate a peace deal, but he said that there is hatred on both sides, hatred from the Russians and hatred from the Ukrainians for each. President Trump says he is sticking himself in the middle of this in order to create peace. But you heard there very stern words from the president saying that they will take a ceasefire if it is offered, because the president believes that his backing, his word, will stand in the global scheme of things. He says that the United Kingdom, as well as France, are prepared to put troops, peacekeeping troops, in Ukraine once a peace deal is signed related to this. The president obviously very upset. He also at one point saying that President Zelensky didn't seem like he was thankful for the help and assistance that he did get. Now, President Zelensky, for his part, wanted to come here and talk about security guarantees. That was his main focus. He is agreeable to the rare earth mineral deal that they've been working on, but he really wants to keep the U.S. weapons going and keep security guarantees on the ground so that Putin does not do this again. And his argument was that Putin has broken every other peace deal he's ever made with Ukraine. Why wouldn't he break this one too? President Trump is saying he was not the one behind those last peace deals. He's the one behind this now, and he won't take any guff, so to speak. We basically saw the adult come into the room and the president saying this is the way it's going to be, and sort of telling Russian President Vladimir Putin that this is the way it's going to be when we sign a peace deal, and don't break it. Back to you guys.
I think that is exactly the right interpretation. Edward Lawrence, thank you so much. And of course, we were watching the stock market as well, because this is a market that was trying to claw back some of the losses that it experienced this week on nervousness over uncertainty about tariffs and what the impact will be come Monday when some of those tariffs are supposed to go into effect. And now you're looking at a stock market that has given up any gains it had today, turned negative. Gary Kaltbaum, you saw that exchange between President Trump and President Zelensky with the vice president piping in there. Sometimes we wonder how things happen behind the scenes and what those conversations are like. That was a front row seat for the American people.
Yeah, and I gather these type of things happen behind closed doors, but this time I'm sitting in the green room and all I'm saying is, whoa. Look, the markets have already been on their back this week. They were getting smoked. The AI trade has been getting blasted. And I think any excuse right now for the market to come down. And today the market was going to bounce because, and still may, we have a couple hours left. But leave no doubt the market's looking at a few things. And next week, the tariffs. And there are two things. And Brian, you said something in the first hour about, oh, but the President Trump could change his mind next week. That's a problem. We need to get some certainty one way or the other. You know, the small businesses are the big part of this country here. And if you get all your stuff from China and all of a sudden, 10% this week, 25% next week, how do you plan going forward? And I think part of the market is that also. And I think the president's got to really consider that. And I'm hoping the Treasury Secretary is a brilliant businessman also is in his ear about that.
We're also waiting moments away from what is supposed to be a press conference between these two men. It's difficult to imagine them getting up to the podium now and answering questions after that. At the same time, because they're both diplomats, I can also see them behind closed doors. Everybody takes a breather and doing that maybe to show Taylor,
All is well.
That was just a moment. All is well.
Yeah, and that would be nice, I think, to see. I'm sort of in the camp, I don't love what we just saw there because I do like that behind closed doors, so I would hope that they would still come out. I think my question is, do we still want a deal? I don't know. I think we all want an end to the war. I think we want an end of the unlimited flow of money there. But I'm just reading here, so apologize that I'm looking down. Trump's focus on Ukraine's commodities has raised questions about what the nation really has to offer. They have no major rare earth reserves that are internationally recognized as economically viable. It's unclear to what extent the U.S. may benefit, though the deal appears broader, maybe, than first thought. The good news is Ukraine is an established producer of coal, iron ore, uranium, titanium, and magnesium, and expanding those could be profitable for the U.S. But the super rare earth stuff, it's still a very unknown. And so my question is, after you see that exchange, is that someone you want to be in business with? Do you want a deal if it's risky and unknown? We speak in ROI terms, a return on investment. What is the return on that investment? And I think maybe I'm more unclear than I was before.
I am so glad that you brought that up because rare earth minerals are something that we've been talking about in a lot of different contexts, right? We're talking about it with our competition, with some of our adversaries around the world. We're talking about it with Greenland. We talk about it with national security. And many of the experts today that were commenting on this leading up into the anticipation of this meeting and press conference, Cheryl, they were talking about China. And they were saying if we can get a deal done with Ukraine to at least have a pipeline into some of these rare earth minerals, we get away from our dependence on China. It also says to China, the playing field is not what it once was. So for national security and for trade, you've got two big implications there.
Well, also, too, you're showing that the United States, A, can broker a deal, and B, the United States is willing to go into this economic partnership with a country like Ukraine. So if you're looking at Xi Jinping, you're saying you might want to think twice before you go into Taiwan. But I'm glad you brought up the Chinese portion of this because you're right. They're the ones that really have the market cornered globally right now when it comes to rare earth minerals. Now, there's more of to Taylor's point, there's more of an energy component that we could actually, with Ukraine that would be a positive for the United States. But also, what about the rest of Europe? When some of that was going on, Jackie, I kept thinking to myself, NATO needs to step it up. They have not been putting up their 2% quotas of GDP that they're supposed. Half of NATO has not been paying up, first and foremost. And we just had Starmer here, right? UK Prime Minister. You had Macron here. I think that the United States, and I think Donald Trump is making this very clear, that we are tired of being the ones that are going to constantly defend Europe. World War II was a different time, and that was a different conversation and a different point in our history as Americans. But when it comes to those minerals and what we can or cannot use Ukraine for, the biggest thing I would say would that be, if nothing else, we're guaranteeing Europe, our allies, that Putin isn't going to railroad Ukraine. If I'm the Polish right now, I'm thrilled. So I really want to see what the reaction is going to be across the pond, if you will.
Brian, what do you think?
One, I don't know what's in Ukraine in terms of rare earth minerals. The explorations were done decades ago by the Soviets. Okay, we don't know the answer to that. But if anything's going to happen, it's going to be because we help, and that's an option for us, not an obligation, but an option. So I'm okay trying to do a deal there. There may be nothing there, but at least we're giving ourselves the right to recoup money. Number two, so I'm gonna push back a little bit, Taylor, with you on should we have seen this?
Yeah.
I think it is excellent that we just saw
to see the way Zelensky handles himself or the other.
Absolutely, because that has been the question for years now with this. Who is America dealing with? And we got to see it right there, plain letter on the screen. We also got to see, and this is fascinating to me. Think about this. A president and a vice president work together in the Oval Office in a negotiation. I don't know that there's been a vice president-president pair that's worked together like that on anything of that kind of substance in my lifetime, honestly. And they play important roles together to create the contours of the conversation. And I think they're going right after what Americans care about, actually.
There are two bottom lines. First, the war part. Boy, we would love to see that end.
Of course.
But I loved that they are defending the American taxpayer. Just remember, the hundreds of billions of dollars that have gone to Ukraine, it's our money.
Yeah.
And that's what they're defending. And when I see him PO'd out in that little, whatever you want to call that, that is defending all that money we sent them. And you can take sides on whether it's good or not that we did that, fine and dandy, but there is a bottom line. That is a ton of money that could have gone to a lot of things here in the USA, and he wants to make sure that that ends, that stops. And where this ends, I don't know. Hopefully the press conference gets a little bit better and a little bit nicer. But again, I love the fact that the dollars count to this.
I don't think it should get nicer. I think the problem with this is America's been too nice. Like, Biden has been too willing to write checks for so long, and you have a president and a vice president here who are saying, we'll do a deal, but we're not going to be nice about it.
I'm saying to get to the end point here.
The American people spoke. This was one of the issues they voted on. They did not want to fund this war any longer, even if their feelings were different when it got started. And you're right, Brian, I love to see that partnership because we never heard from Kamala Harris. You barely even saw Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in a frame together, let alone negotiating meetings in this way. And to the point that you made about that display of force, if you will, from the president and vice president, I'll call it that. It wasn't just to give Vladimir Putin a message. It wasn't just to tell Zelensky the party's over and you need to get on the train message either. It's to Iran. It's to North Korea. It's to all our adversaries in this foreign policy debacle that Joe Biden left President Trump to say, there's a new sheriff in town and you're seeing how I negotiate. So if we end up having a conversation or if we end up getting into it, it's not going to end well for you.
Can I make a point, Jackie? You know, Jack Keane is a frequent guest on our programs here on Fox Business and the News Channel. And he says that we need to make Ukraine a defense consumer. That if you have a stable and secure Ukraine, which is what Donald Trump is offering him right now, a path forward to end this war, and his country becomes prosperous and becomes economically strong again, you have a country as of Ukraine who could be buying weapons from us. We're not giving them weapons anymore. I thought that was an interesting point of view from
I just want to make sure in these deals that we are not bleeding the lines of doing an economic deal that ends up, to Kevin Leary's point, if I go in and I want to extract rare earth minerals, I then need some sort of security guarantee on top of that to make sure then Russia doesn't encroach on the development I've built there to help get the minerals out of the ground. And does that become a de facto security guarantee, which we do not want? And I think the president and the vice president have been clear on that. That's a non-starter.
It's a great point. And President Trump said just the other day, he said, if we go in and do an economic deal and we have our people there, it's like an automatic security. And I agree that makes me me nervous. But I also would say this, and I know we got to go. Trump doesn't give away anything, okay? And he's not going to give away American security. You can see that in this meeting today. He gives away nothing without something on the other side.